As you get older, you notice some interesting things. Some people, particularly husbands, develop a selective hearing. Wives, am I right? Fake news. You heard that though, right? But we also, and I think this applies to both genders, as we age, we get a selective memory too. My long-term memory is great, but my short-term memory is not so great. I can't tell you what I did Thursday, but I know exactly what I was doing on New Year's Day, 1969. Wow, 49 years ago? I know where I was on New Year's Day, 1969. I was sprawled on the living room floor of our family's home in Alice, Texas, beautiful Alice, Texas. And I had several sheets of lined notebook paper and a big pen, and I was listening to my radio station, 55 KTSA, as they counted down the top 100 songs of 1968. Now, in those pre-internet days, it was not a simple task to find out what the top 100 songs of the year were. You had to be listening to the radio on the last couple of days of the year to hear the whole countdown. And finally, on New Year's Day, they were finishing up, and I was writing down. I wanted a complete list of all 100 songs. And so I was there on the floor writing down as each song would start. I'd write down who sang it and what the song was. And Top 40 radio in 1968 was a very eclectic thing, much more so than today. Now everybody's got their niche. But in 1968 on the Top 40 station, you might hear a Frank Sinatra song, followed by a Jimi Hendrix song, followed by Jeannie C. Riley singing about the Harper Valley PTA. And we didn't know it was ever going to be any different than that, but it is very different than that. And so because it was so eclectic, it was impossible to spot any kind of pattern as they counted down the top 100 songs. And we got down to the top 10, and the suspense was really building. And in the top 10, there were some great songs. Mrs. Robertson by Simon and Garfunkel. Sunshine of Your Love by Cream, which was the first thing we learned to play on the guitar. Dun, 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 dun. And how about Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding? These are all in the top 10 for the year. I'm getting more and more excited as I'm writing down the names and the artists on this notebook paper with my blue big pen. And finally, we're very near the end. It's time for the second highest rated song of 1968. And the DJ came on and said, song number 2 is Hey Jude by the Beatles. And I thought, wow, that's number 2? Hey Jude topped the charts for 9 weeks, in spite of the fact that it was 7 minutes long. That was unheard of in Top 40 radio to play a song that was 7 minutes long. And it was number 1 on every chart for 9 weeks. And that was the number 2 song. What could possibly top Hey Jude as the number 1 song of 1968? Any guesses? Nope. 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 You're never going to guess it. The number 1 song of 1968 was recorded by a French orchestra leader named Paul Marriott. It was a song called Love. Number 1 song of 1968. Are you kidding me? I couldn't believe it. I wrote it down, but we all know what happened next. The Beatles were never heard from again. Instead, millions of teenagers began wearing their hair like Paul Marriott, dressing like he did. Paul Marriott mania swept the world. Well, not exactly. Paul Marriott lived to be 81 years old, but he never even came close to having another hit song. In fact, in 1969, he recorded an instrumental version of Hey Jude. And so I thought, how can this be? How can this possibly be? You ask anyone in the world, what's a bigger song than Hey Jude in 1968? Nobody's going to say Love is Blue by Paul Marriott. Is that a better song? Nah. No way. It just goes to show you, though, that we don't always know what's going to have lasting value. What's going to be a flash in the pan. Let me give you another example. I couldn't believe that my radio station, KTSA, 5500, with Ricky Ware, yeah, I see some nods out there, they said, my station said that Love is Blue was the #1 song. I'm still mad about it 49 years later. But it's not the only time that I realized what your first impression is not always right. Just a few years before Hey Jude, I was living in South Texas in a tiny, tiny little town. And nobody in that tiny little town in 1963, or whenever this was, nobody had ever seen a pizza. Hard to believe now. But there were no pizza restaurants in South Texas. In fact, you could go to the grocery store and there was not even such a thing as a frozen pizza in the grocery store. We had never seen a pizza. But my mother saw an article in a women's magazine that said, pizza pies are increasing in popularity. And she decided it was time for the Robertson family to get on board. As I said, we'd never seen a pizza. We didn't know what they looked like, but my mother thought, I've baked lots of pies. How hard could it be? Let's see. I have a pie plate. She got out her pie plate that she used for baking pumpkin pies and pecan pies. She knew that pizzas had a crust. She knew how to make pie crust. And by the way, she made pie crust. She didn't buy one at the store. She made it, and we got to eat all the little extra pieces that were cut off and trimmed. And so she put a crust in the pie plate, baked it. Then she put a couple of cans of tomato sauce in it. And she sprinkled some Parmesan cheese on the top of it, and she stuck it in the oven. She left it in there a long time because she kept checking on it, and it was not gelling at all. And finally, she was afraid her crust was going to burn, so she took it out and said, all right, everybody come to the table. We all approached the table with fear and trepidation as my mother came in from the kitchen and set this thing in the middle of the table. All our eyes got big. What is it? It's a pizza pie. It's the hottest thing right now. And so then we got to watch our mother try to slice a 2-inch thick, gloppy mess of tomato sauce and dish it up on our plate. I think our family is probably the only people in the world who might have ever said, hey, Mom, pour me a cup of pizza, would you? Because it was just a mess. It was horrible. And even my dad, who could eat anything, had nothing to say about it. And none of us had more than a couple of bites. And I think they buried the rest of it in the backyard, and we were told never to speak of this again. Now, if you had asked me at that point, Mike, do you think pizza might be your favorite food? I would have said, nah, no way. But you know what? The year after that, Pizza Hut came to South Texas. And all of a sudden, it all became clear to us. Oh, that's what pizza is. You don't ever know what's going to turn out to be life-changing and what is just a flash in the pan. Our judgment is rarely perfect, especially our snap judgment, our first impression. That person you meet that just irritates you and makes you roll your eyes and say, what a goofball, and then you end up marrying that person. It didn't happen to me, but you should see who my wife married. Or the person you say, you're my best friend, and then you realize 10 years have gone by and you haven't spoken. Well, I thought we were going to be friends forever. What happened? Our first judgment is not always correct. Which group do you think is bigger? The people who bought stock in Apple computers in the 80s or the people who sunk all their money into Beanie Babies in the 90s? Who made out better? If only we could tell which opportunities are a waste of time and which ones are going to turn into something amazing. Well, it's nothing new. Imagine you're a fisherman, and you're sitting by your fishing boat one day mending the nets, and this stranger comes walking by. And this stranger says, "Hey, come with me. I'll show you how to fish for people." What? Peter could have easily said, "Nah, no. I'm not going to do that. I can't do that. That doesn't make sense. I don't even know who you are." But he said yes, and his life changed, and the world changed. Peter, his brother, James, Andrew, John, they all dropped their nets and followed Jesus. And their lives were never the same. What seemed like such a strange, momentary thing, when they could have said, "Nah," changed their lives and brought us a new way to live. Or imagine you're a shepherd and you're in the middle of nowhere trying to feed your flock of sheep, and you see in the distance a fire. You're in the desert. What's the fire doing there? And you get closer and you see that there's a bush that's burning, but it's not being consumed by the fire. And when you get close enough, the bush begins to what? Talk to you? And says, "Moses, I have chosen you to lead my people out of slavery into the promised land." Moses could have said, "Nah." In fact, he did. He said, "I'm not the right guy for this." But God said, "No, you are. I have chosen you, and only you." God insisted that Moses was the right one for the job. How do we recognize those moments, the one when your whole universe changes in the twinkling of an eye? How can you tell whether what happens is going to be "Hey Jude" or whether it's going to be "Love is Blue"? How can you know? I think you can learn to recognize those moments in the future, I think you can learn to recognize them by looking back, by looking at moments in the past, because you get some perspective and you can see, oh, that's when my life changed right there. That one decision changed my life. And by looking backwards and seeing when things changed and letting us know how things worked out, I think we can become a little bit more wise about future decisions. After Peter said yes to Jesus, for the rest of his life, do you think he said yes or no more often? For myself, I have learned that all the best stories start with yes. You don't get a good story when somebody says, "Hey, do you think you could do this?" And you say, "No." Or when you say, "I don't know, I might be able to, but I'd have to really study up on it." No, the best stories all begin when somebody says, "Could you do this?" And you say, "Yes. Yes." So if we look back and examine those moments when things change, maybe we can be alert and see when future things happen. 27 years ago, I quit my church job. I was a music and youth director in Dripping Springs, Texas, at First Baptist Church. I thought, I'm never working at a church again. In fact, I may not ever even go to church again. I was serious. I was burned out. I was so tired of what church had become to me. And so for a while, we didn't really go anywhere. And then we checked out a couple of churches here in Austin. We went to one. It was so frozen. Not a single person spoke to us from the moment we walked in the door to the moment we walked out. I couldn't believe it. And I thought, see, this is why I don't want to go to church anywhere. They're all the same. And then one day, we decided to go try out a big church out on Loop 360. And we walked into Riverbend Church, and I thought, this is different. Because everything from the building to the music, to the bulletin, to the sermon. Everything seemed like it was designed just for me. And I thought, wow, maybe this is where we belong. I had no idea that my life would change because of that first Sunday I attended there. I had no idea that eventually I would end up working at that church. I had no idea that eventually they would say, we think you should be a pastor here. Can we ordain you? What? I had no idea that was going to happen. And we spent 25 years of our life, thousands of hours at that church, and it became home to us. I had no idea. But then, just a year ago, we were without a church. We were church shopping again. When I resigned from Riverbend, once again I thought, I'm never working at another church. I'm done with that. It was fine, but I'm done with that. And again, we started looking for a place to go, and I thought, we're never going to find a place that feels like that. And it made me sad because I thought, we had our one place, and we can't repeat that. And then one day I'm driving down Exposition Boulevard, and I see a banner that says, Cynthia Clausen and Reagan Courtney in worship every Sunday morning. We live about 8 blocks from here. We knew Cynthia Clausen and Reagan Courtney. They had been friends of ours for years. Some of those friends that we hadn't talked to in a few years. But I had no idea they were here. And I told Lisa, I said, Cynthia and Reagan are there. And so we decided to come visit this church called the Sanctuary. Last December, a year ago in December, and we came in and we sat down and we were here with 10 people. And we heard Cynthia use her wonderful gift, and we heard Reagan use his wonderful gift, and we went home and I said, that was pretty cool. It's the total opposite of what we've been doing for 25 years. We've been going to a church that had a full orchestra and snow falling from the ceiling on Christmas Eve and dancers and movies and all kinds of flash and thousands of people coming to it. And here we were with 10 people. But I said, this feels good. And so we started coming to the Sanctuary. And just a couple of months later, Cynthia and Reagan said, we think we're done here. And all of a sudden, I feel God tapping me on the shoulder. Because God has another crazy idea. It's a crazy idea. And God says, Mike, what would you think about being the pastor of this church? That was illogical. It was unbelievable. There's no way that should have happened. God said, would you do this? And I said, nah, 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 hey Jude. Because God, I love God's sense of humor. God said, I want to take your sad song and make it better. I want to teach you to fish for people too. And so I said, yeah. I didn't see it coming any more than Peter saw Jesus coming. But when the moment happened and the question was asked, I knew enough to say, yeah. See, opportunities are going to present themselves this year. Opportunities you've never thought of. Chances for you to do things you've never even considered. Your imagination may be great, but it's not as good as God's. You could never make a duck-billed platypus, but God can. And that's not even the strangest thing. And as I said, the more I say yes, the better my life gets. The more exciting, the more fulfilling my life gets. This is not just a new year. It's 365 new days. Every day is a brand new day. You don't have to wait for January 1st to make a change in your life to say yes to something. January 1st was on Monday this week. It really threw me off because I couldn't start my diet on Monday because Monday was still a holiday. So I had to wait till Tuesday. But I realized Tuesday's just another day. Every day we get a clean slate. Every day we get a blank page. Every day we get to write the story of our life. And if your story is dull and boring, it's your fault. It's not God's fault, because you're sitting there with a blank page and a pencil in your hand. God would love to see you write something amazing. Say, today I did something I never thought I would do. I asked if I could sing a solo in church. I started taking painting lessons. I took some cookies to my next door neighbor that I haven't ever met. I engaged the barista at my coffee shop in more than just good morning and thank you, and found out her name and where she's from. You have 365 chances to do something amazing this year. And consider this, if you're never able to keep your resolutions, maybe you're not making the right resolutions. Maybe you need to change your resolutions. We talked a couple of months ago about Solomon and how God came to Solomon and said, ask me for what you want and I'll give it to you. Wow. Pizza. No. Wealth, fame. Solomon said, I want wisdom. He was already pretty smart to answer that question that way. I want wisdom, and God gave it to him, and we still talk about him thousands of years later as a very wise man, the wisest man who maybe ever lived. So maybe that's the gift we need to be asking for, is wisdom. Making a resolution to be more wise instead of making a resolution that you're going to be more thrifty this year. How about becoming wiser about how you actually spend your money? Where does it actually go? You might be surprised. Instead of saying, I'm going to lose weight this year, how about becoming wise about how much you actually eat in a day and what kind of food you eat and what it's doing to you? I want to be wiser this year. I want to become more knowledgeable about my own life than I am now. And if you want to identify those monumental moments in your life, those moments when something incredible could happen or could not happen, depending on your reaction, you need to examine every moment for possibilities. You heard me say it before, and I will continue to say it until everybody knows it. God is everywhere. And that means no matter what you're going through, if you take a minute to stop and say, where is God in this? I promise you he is there, and that you can find him, and that you can learn something from that moment. And when you realize every moment is a little lesson from God, and you start looking for it, you're not going to miss the big ones because you're paying attention to even the small ones. And suddenly your life that seemed humdrum and boring and dull, you start recognizing the signs of God every day, where God pops up here and there and everywhere. Your success in becoming more discerning and learning to recognize those God moments in contrast to the flash in the pan moments. Your success is going to be much greater if you do what Peter did when Jesus came by and spoke to him. Peter opened his heart and he led Jesus in. And if you've never done that, it's no wonder your decisions are hard. It's no wonder bad things seem to follow you around. It's no wonder life seems so challenging if you haven't ever done what Peter did. It's going to be hard to make wise choices. But you know what? The minute you let him into your heart, then you can start to make it better, better, better. It's not a blue year. It's a new year. What are you going to do with it to make it better? Let's pray.